What if I told you the people who post the least about themselves online are often the ones who are the most psychologically stable in the room? And no, it's not because they are insecure. It might actually be the opposite. Because while everyone is chasing attention, there is a group of people quietly mastering something far more powerful. And today, you are going to understand what's really happening inside their minds. Think about this for a second. You open social media, you see people posting selfies, vacations, meals, gym progress, life updates. And then there is that one person. No selfies, no personal life updates. Maybe just quotes, memes, or nothing at all. Your brain automatically does something interesting. It starts to fill in the blanks. Is this person private? Are they confident? Are they hiding something? Are they different? Privacy-driven identity control means some people deliberately manage how much of themselves the world gets to see. Because they understand that once an image is shared, they lose ownership of how it is interpreted. In psychological terms, every photo posted online becomes a fragmented identity signal. Meaning others don't see the full person, only a frozen version of them in a specific mood, angle, or moment. People who avoid posting their photos are often highly aware of this distortion. They know that once their image is out there, it can be judged, compared, misread, or even reshaped by the viewer's biases. This behavior is not necessarily about fear, it is about control. Instead of allowing hundreds or thousands of people to construct a version of them based on selective visuals, they prefer to keep their identity internally anchored. Their self-concept is less dependent on external feedback loops, so they don't feel the need to constantly validate how they look or what they are doing. Psychologically, this reduces identity leakage, where a person's sense of self becomes scattered across likes, comments, and reactions. These individuals often prefer context-rich interactions, where identity is experienced through conversation, behavior, and presence, rather than appearance. They understand that images can be misleading because they capture aesthetics, not essence. By limiting photo sharing, they maintain tighter psychological boundaries between their real self and their public perception. This creates a stronger sense of internal stability because their identity is not constantly being edited by external opinions or shaped by unpredictable audience interpretation. Low validation dependency refers to a psychological state where a person's sense of worth is not strongly tied to external approval, such as likes, comments, shares, or visual recognition. People who don't post their photos often display this trait because they are not actively seeking emotional reinforcement from social media feedback loops. In most users, posting a photo triggers an anticipation cycle, waiting for reactions, comparing engagement, and subconsciously measuring personal value through numbers. Over time, this can train the brain to associate self-esteem with digital response. Individuals with low validation dependency break this cycle. Their emotional regulation is less influenced by how others react to their appearance or lifestyle. Instead of asking, "How will people respond to this?" they are more likely to ask, "Does this matter to me personally?" This shift in internal dialogue reduces the psychological volatility that comes with social comparison. They are less affected by fluctuations in attention, which creates a more stable self-image. Neurologically, they are less driven by dopamine spikes linked to social approval. This means they don't experience the same reward anticipation from posting content. So, the absence of photo sharing does not feel like loss. Instead, it feels neutral or even liberating. They are also less likely to engage in performative behavior, where actions are shaped primarily to gain external validation rather than personal meaning. This doesn't mean they lack confidence. In many cases, it indicates that their confidence is internally generated rather than externally borrowed. Their identity is not reinforced by audience feedback, but by personal standards, private achievements, and internal benchmarks that are not dependent on social media recognition. High self-monitoring in this context means a heightened awareness of how one might be perceived by others. Combined with a strong ability to regulate that image intentionally, people who don't post their photos are often not unaware of social media. They are highly aware of it, sometimes even more than frequent posters. The difference is that they carefully evaluate the cost of visibility before sharing anything personal. Every image is mentally processed through questions like, "What does this reveal about me? How might this be interpreted out of context? Does this align with how I want to be understood long-term?" This creates a form of psychological precision. Instead of impulsively sharing moments, they filter their self-expression through reflection and control. Their identity presentation becomes selective, not reactive. In many cases, this is linked to a strong internal observer, an ongoing mental process that tracks behavior, tone, and potential perception outcomes. While some people externalize identity through constant posting, high self-monitors internalize it, rehearsing how they appear before it ever reaches an audience. This doesn't necessarily mean insecurity, it often reflects strategic social intelligence. They understand that digital environments flatten complexity, turning nuanced human identity into simplified visuals. Because of this, they may avoid photos altogether to prevent misinterpretation or unwanted labeling. By limiting exposure, they reduce the number of interpretations others can construct about them. Over time, this habit reinforces a controlled identity boundary. They choose when and how they are seen rather than letting algorithms or social trends dictate visibility. This gives them a stronger sense of agency over their digital footprint and helps preserve a more intentional version of self-presentation that is less vulnerable to distortion. Digital detachment mindset refers to a psychological orientation where a person uses social media as a functional tool rather than a stage for identity performance. People who don't post their photos often fall into this pattern because they are not emotionally invested in the platform's reward system. They are present but not absorbed. They observe rather than participate in the competitive dynamics of visibility. In this mindset, social media loses its role as a mirror of self-worth. Instead of thinking in terms of how do I look online, they think in terms of utility, communication, information, or passive consumption. This reduces emotional attachment to digital identity construction. As a result, there is no internal pressure to constantly update personal images or maintain an aesthetic presence. Their online behavior is guided by intention rather than impulse. Psychologically, this detachment reduces cognitive load. They are not constantly managing impressions, tracking engagement metrics, or adjusting behavior based on audience feedback. This frees mental bandwidth for offline focus, deeper relationships, and long-term thinking. It also weakens the habitual loop of posting for reinforcement, which in many users becomes a subtle dependency over time. At a deeper level, digital detachment often reflects a separation between self-worth and visibility. They do not equate being seen online with being significant in real life. This allows them to remain emotionally stable even in environments where attention is highly rewarded and constantly fluctuating. Their relationship with social media becomes selective and controlled where absence of posting is not avoidance but a deliberate reduction of unnecessary digital noise in their identity system. Psychological independence in this context refers to the ability to maintain one's thoughts, emotions, and self-image without being heavily influenced by social trends, online comparison, or collective behavior. People who don't post their photos often demonstrate this because they are less driven by the unconscious pressure to align with what is currently socially rewarded online. They are not constantly scanning their environment for cues on what is acceptable or popular to display. Instead, their sense of identity is anchored internally. They are guided more by personal values, private standards, and individual preferences than by external validation systems. This reduces the psychological pull of comparison loops where individuals measure their appearance, lifestyle, or achievements against curated versions of others. By not participating in photo posting, they step outside this competitive visibility framework altogether. This independence also affects emotional resilience. When identity is not tied to public perception, criticism, or lack of attention has less psychological impact. They are not relying on social feedback to confirm their worth, so fluctuations in engagement do not destabilize their self-concept. Over time, this creates a more stable emotional baseline. On a behavioral level, psychologically independent individuals tend to resist automatic conformity. They do not feel compelled to document everything or turn experiences into content. Instead, they prioritize experiencing life directly rather than translating it into digital representation. This creates a stronger separation between lived reality and online expression. Ultimately, this trait reflects a deeper form of autonomy where identity is self-authored rather than socially edited. Their decisions about visibility are intentional, not reactive, allowing them to remain less influenced by the shifting expectations of digital culture. A sixth layer that often goes unnoticed is how social perception bias reshapes the way these individuals are interpreted by others. When someone doesn't post their photos, people around them unconsciously start constructing assumptions to fill the gap. The human brain is uncomfortable with missing information. So, it replaces absence with imagination. This is where bias begins to form. Some may assume the person is extremely private. Others may think they are unusually confident. And some may even interpret it as secrecy or detachment from social life. In reality, none of these assumptions are guaranteed to be accurate, but they feel convincing to the observer because the mind prefers a complete story over uncertainty. This dynamic creates an interesting psychological advantage. By limiting visual exposure, these individuals unintentionally gain narrative ambiguity. They are not locked into a fixed public image, which gives them flexibility in how they are perceived across different contexts. Unlike highly visible individuals whose identity becomes rigid through repeated exposure, they remain interpretively open-ended. This can reduce stereotyping and allow different environments to project different meanings onto them. At the same time, this also protects them from overexposure fatigue. When a person's face is constantly circulated online, they become mentally familiar to strangers, which can sometimes reduce personal boundaries in real-world interactions. By staying visually absent, they preserve a sense of unfamiliarity, which keeps social encounters more grounded in direct experience rather than preconceived digital impressions. This balance between absence and interpretation creates a psychological space where identity is less defined by visibility and more shaped by context, allowing them to exist without being overly defined by a single fixed image in the collective mind. Another important layer is the role of emotional self-containment. People who don't post their photos often develop a stronger ability to hold their emotions internally rather than externalizing them for social feedback. In many online environments, posting a picture is not just about sharing an image. It can become a subtle request for emotional reinforcement. The reactions, comments, and engagements serve as micro-validations that regulate mood. Over time, this can train individuals to unconsciously depend on external signals to stabilize